Thank you to the bookstore. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for coming out on sharing your Saturday for poetry. That's great. Okay. I'm going to start with this poem, Discovering Girdles. For younger people, I guess it's Discovering Spanx. I don't know what to do with this contraption of polyester and cotton, troublesome lace, black, white, another woman's nude, whatever the color. Its trick is to hide flesh, to constrict the skin like a bit of truth, a secret buried in the garden of women's undergarments. A prepubescent girl signals her mother to quiet, to lower what must be her first bra, and yes, it's fine, and can she go now? My mother's concerns for me were body odor and virginity, how to smell like a flower without being plucked. Robust women filled her church, their stomachs suffusing the linen of long dresses doused with perfume. I do not know how to behave publicly, contemplating these hip huggers that wouldn't matter to those women, reaching beyond the fitting rooms of earth. Sound, Part 1, Girl with a Red Scarf. There was a girl with a red scarf, a girl with a white scarf, a girl with a pink scarf, and a girl with a scarf of pale, pale blue. And when, from a corner of earth, far from where the girls were born and far from where any of the girls then stood, their scarves unwound and snapped like ribbons or wild, wild hair. It was the girl with the red scarf who stood apart from the others, though they all stood laughing wildly together. And there was talk of toads and talk of kissing and many gowns and much ceremony, but mostly talk for talk's sake, away from too many ears curved to listen. Though listening is what the girl with the red scarf did most, which made her from a distance seem still, though she moved with the other girls, or at other times with her brothers and sisters in a queue, slithering onto the school bus or into the house, which was never still. And when, at particular moments, her ears were full of odd instructions, and she needed to hear something across the room, she listened with the whole of her body, her eyes and skin, her hair, which was not wild but microscopically braided. Sound was God as she understood it, always poised to listen. What does a girl with a red scarf hear? Only she knows, approaching the world from the inside in. The center of the ear, a drum, rain on leaves, fingers on books, on bellies, on windows. With a boy pressed against her, she attempted music, a collaborative first, an unsex. What was that sound? The not girl signal, womanish gardenia opening. God is good, sometimes. Fierce fragmentation, lonely tune. blessing blue crabs. Smiling white teeth, television host, pleased with her face, her, there you have it, filling the screen. One last shot of the elegant restaurant poised a few miles across town. Its proud-bellied chef and owner, spit-polished silver glasses clear enough to ring. Goodbye to the women who blessed the blue crabs with hymns, who undressed the trapped bodies from once blue shells, lifted the meat from their legs, sealed flesh for markets, who weren't invited to sit at the linen cloth tables of the fine restaurant featured on the cooking program. A must stop for indulgent diners passing through the low country, who, still in uniform, sang stridently in the cannery kitchen, who spoke barely above whispers to cameras stationed outdoors for interviews against the backdrop of a foamy sea, whimsical sailboats, who posed at picnic benches propped for the occasion, supplied with paper napkins, who sampled the chef's famous crab cakes, a cup of water to wash them down. Yes, they are delicious. What else could they answer without accusation of ungratefulness, their dark fingers shaking away the delicate crumbs? I'm going to read some, I don't know, I guess you can call them like mother-daughter poems. That seems like way too simplistic for the mother-daughter struggle. But I don't know, I work with this theme or idea, relationship a lot in this book. And I think Wang Ping, she's a poet, she's a really great poet, and she says in one of her poems about writing about her mother, you know, just stop the fight and let her flow through you. And I think that was really helpful to me a long time ago when I tried to write about mothers. To describe my body walking, I cannot get this mic right, let's see here. Okay. To describe my body walking. To describe my body walking, I must go back to my mother's body walking with an aimless switch in this moment of baptismal snow or abysmal flurry. There's a shadow of free fall frenzy and her unhurried, the way snowflakes are unhurried toward transformation at my living room window. She moves unlabored. She will not ask me to invite her in, but she will expect it. I will open the door to her. She is my mother, even if she is made of snow and ice and air and the repetition of years, a means, a ways. She came out of trees surrounding me. I see her cross, now the creak in her patent leather shoes, their navy glimmer like a slick hole I might peer over and fall into against so much snow, weighing down the prayerful arms of sycamores which doused the bushes last autumn. Her little hearse broke down near the exit that leads to my house. Now she must walk. She will be tired. I will let her in, though she will not ask. She has come so far past the mud and twigs, the abandoned nests. This time of year, she can't tell the living from the dead. The pathway is mostly still, except for her moving with the snow, becoming the snow. Forgiveness, she is a stamp in it. The tapping of boots at the porch steps, not spring or summer, just her advancing, multiplying, falling through branches. There's a flurry of her. I'll read this poem, Hurricane, that I wrote for my daughter, who was born in New Orleans. I always say, if you critique your mother, you have more compassion, maybe when you become a mother. So, Hurricane for my daughter born in New Orleans, and she grew up in Pittsburgh, actually. And in Pittsburgh, there's a little carnival that comes to town every spring, and there's a ride there that's called the Hurricane. And one year when my daughter was super small, she wanted to get on this ride, and my husband and my son, we were all just thinking, there's no frickin' way I'm getting on that rickety old ride, you know, with this girl. And so while we're all like arguing, trying to figure out who was going to be stuck going with this girl on this ride, she just puts up her hand and says, just give me the tickets, I'll go by myself. Hurricane. 4 tickets left. I let her go. Firstborn into a hurricane. I thought she escaped the floodwaters. No, but her head is empty of the drowned for now, though she took her first breath below sea level. Ah, ah, and ah, mama, let me go. She speaks what every smart child knows. To get grown, you unlatch your hands from the groan and up and up and up and up. She turns, latched in the seat of a hurricane. You let your girl, what? You let your girl, what? I did, so she do. I did, so she do. So, girl, you can ride a hurricane. And she do, and she do, and she do, and she do. She do make my river an ocean. Memorial, Baptist, Protestant, birth. My girl walked away from a hurricane. And she do, and she do, and she do, and she do. She do take my hand a while longer. The haunts in my pocket I'll keep to a hum. Katrina was a woman I knew. When you were an infant, she rained on you, and she do, and she do, and she do, and she do. Thank you. And then I'll just close with this last poem. Sound, Part 4, Notes on Polyphony. I try so hard to be like, to say something, to share something intelligent. And sometimes, I don't know, I just have to go with my intuition. So this poem, I just tried to deal with a certain kind of anxiety around that. People around you sometimes expecting you to know the answers to everything when you feel like, I don't know shit. So, okay. I think it's good to say that sometimes. I don't know. Okay. At first, I felt my head was too much with me. Take it off, I heard a voice say. Your head, you got to take it off. So I closed my eyes and took my head by the ears and turned. It came off easy, my head, like all my life it was waiting for me to unscrew it. So I sat it down quietly beside me, and this allowed my mouth, which all before had been sewed shut, to open and sing. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? And my hips, torso, and upright arms trembled at that sudden a cappella. I want to thank you for hearing this small trickle in the sea. I am trying to steady myself as I wait. There's a bored shark coloring the water. There's a girl cradling her head somewhere. She is lost, and someone has left her at the shore without a song, without a whistle. There is only her blood and the blood of her siblings. There is only the sun, like the glimmer of the state's buttons, erasing that girl. You have placed her in my throat, and now I can reattach my head. And the girl is inside me. She can move now as my body moves. My neck, my head, nodding. Thank you.
Thanks, Yona. That was so beautiful. It was like a song. And thank you, Susan and Yona, for reading for us tonight. And thanks to everybody who has come. And it's wonderful. I forgot to thank the Michigan Council for the Arts and Cultural Affairs. Thinking of now, who have helped fund this reading and our series. So we're really grateful to them too. I'm also really grateful to Susan, who just out of the blue wanted to volunteer for us about a year ago or so. We'd met a long time ago in grad school, and I'd asked her who she'd like to bring, and she mentioned Yona, and I had just been reading Yona's poems that morning, so it was really wonderful. It was like a magic trick, gift come true. And I just want to say that I really appreciate everything that Susan does, and anything from like helping with grants and helping with readers, reading, judging. She also brings her kids and helps me make like sandbag lanterns out at White Lotus Farm in a windstorm. And her kid tells how fast the wind is going, and it's really helpful. Susan, it's true. Susan got her MFA here, like I said. She also got a Wallace Stegner grant from Stanford, and her first book of poems on the vanishing of large creatures won the John C. Zacharias First Book Award. John Scoyles, who is the judge, said, "Throughout this book, moments, habits, relationships, and objects are illuminated in such a way as to make the reader do a double take, to reevaluate and appreciate the overlooked, the taken for granted." And I just want to say that I love how these two poets their poetry works together, complementing each other, so beautiful and so lyrical. I just want to read a quote of Susan's that I love. I'm just skipping around a little bit, but all the elsewheres alter here as what you remember changes what you think. Not spider, nor plum, nor pebble possess any of the names we give them. Out there in the dark, the true thing. Please welcome Susan.
I wanted to say thank you as well to Sarah and to One Pause and to the very excellent Literati for hosting us. We're really glad that you're in town. And I also wanted to thank my friends that are here. I think I know almost every person in the audience. I have my friends who are my writing friends, my friends who do climate and environmental work with me, my neighbors, my work pals, and my friend and my mayoral candidate, Christopher Taylor, and my fellow parents. I know many of you don't spend your Saturday night at a poetry reading or any night ever, and the fact that you came out to hear me read poems tonight really means a lot to me, so thank you. I'm going to read some poems from a new manuscript that is called Other Wonders. I'm really glad that I get to stand up in the glow of Yona's poems too. It's really just so nice to have her here, and it just makes me feel like I'm at home. This poem is called Overlook. Some afternoons I entered the enclosed spaces where the injured raptors lived. They'd flown into power lines or had been hit by cars, and they would not get any better. From their enclosures, they could see the woods and the sky. Turkey vultures would fly in from the trees and stand on our turkey vulture's roof. I had become someone who could extend her gloved hand to a great horned owl, and the owl would lift its talons and step, electing not to crush my hand, as it could have. To be that close to a wild creature is to understand there is something permanently alien in the world, but that this alienness also resembles the powers we hold over each other. The way this man arouses me, but not that one. The body the conduit through which the universe is conducted, as all of us are caught by what we have to be, but is not us. As when my children are snagged on a trivial distraction from deep in the midbrain, where trouble starts, where accidents happen, but where, also, whatever magic exists is made, in our case, human. And also owlish, vulturine, falconoid, what have you. Wave maneuver. I'd stood before triptychs in famous museums of Mary and her child, and felt no pull until I had children of my own. It was the shape her arm made, cradling the baby. Erickson treated a woman for years without progress, until, watching his daughter reach for her glass, he saw her arm curve away from her new breasts and understood his patient was a man. How our bodies betray themselves. The blind man's cane extends his senses. The infant steers her spoon directly to her lips. In high school, driving home, I saw the sign for my exit and became aware I didn't have to turn off, that I could keep driving north through the pine-pinned landscape, across the bridge under which a pilot once flew a plane, into the empty Upper Peninsula, through Canada and beyond. There was a beauty to the car, the routes lit in all directions, like the magnetic rails the starlings see and follow, and the mute swans who slice the overhead air in metallic bursts across the lazy sun-streaked sky. There are other wonders. bamboo blooms illogically everywhere at once. Fresh water can be found in the center of the sea by sailors who can read the currents, who know to lower their buckets and drink. Walking home at night, in lit windows I see dancers rehearse, extending their arms in synchrony, lengthening their fingers. They disappear as one, and their shadows might be lost pages rolling across the wall. The crows gather in the tall tree outside my office, calling to the winter night sky, then lifting simultaneously into the dark. Oh, if I could bind myself to that moment. In packed theaters where we too make a fluid shape, when our applause falls into rhythm and we clap and clap together, having seen something that brought tears of recognition to our eyes. This poem is called Falling Through, and in it I do mention my neighbor. I have to say that none of these are my neighbor now. This was something that happened before I moved to Ann Arbor, and you will understand why it stayed with me when I read. And it's called Falling Through. My neighbor perched high on a ladder one weekend afternoon, trimmed to the wrong branch, and sent himself slowly wheeling through the sky. His curve as smooth as any compassed arc, a graceful fall completed when he landed in a fortunately leafy bush. To call it beautiful misses the point, maybe, but it was. And also funny, after the fact, when he stood and walked away, unharmed, no longer his dignified, neighborly self. But it's the moment when he understood it was happening that I return to. That fear, and whether he resisted it or surrendered. How often it happens that we step, half-consideringly, into the impersonal forces at work, unable to pull ourselves back. How the 50 years of our working lives must limit our thoughts, as the pyramid size was ultimately determined by what could be built within the pharaoh's life, and our own blood moves through us at an appalling speed. My son had been born early, before his body had developed the reflex to suck, and spent his first 2 weeks covered with tubes and wires. And I did not know him yet, in the lasting way, but I saw he had my grandfather's face. And oh, I was afraid. Already we were moving through it. This poem mentions Mary Anning, who was a fossil hunter. She was born in 1799 on the Dorset coast of England, and she and her family lived on cliffs, which during the winter were subject to frequent landslides. And if you could get out there quickly enough, you could discover the fossils that were uncovered by these landslides. And she and her brother would go out and collect them before they tumbled into the sea. And she discovered the first complete ichthyosaur skeleton, which was a giant marine reptile. They could grow to be like 50 feet. I mean, they were immense. And it was 1811 when she discovered it. So it was one of the first challenges to the accepted version of creation and the rising flood, which is a great story in itself, but she was 12 when she found it, which I also think is just a spectacular aspect to the story. And this poem is called Accounting. There is a point at which a person's feel for numbers goes from definite to indistinct. The table's 8 chairs are too many to count without actually counting, but not the apple's quarters, eaten as the wind moves through the great silver maple's leaves. In a car, I can see 5 seconds into the future, and in an afternoon I can reach a town that once was days away. Given this, we may choose any unknowable item that belongs to another landscape, and with it gauge the weight of ordinary things. Stop signs and stones may be truly seen when keeping in mind the megatons of water that press the rays against the ocean floor for millions of years. Or the child, Mary Anning, unearthing the ancient ichthyosaur, can be precisely seen as she works to apprehend both the fact of such a creature and its size. And this poem mentions another 12-year-old girl, my daughter Hazel. It's called Latitudes. She has asked, and I've promised, and so when she turns 12, I take my daughter to get her ears pierced. She is unmarred and open as a field, so beautiful and unblemished, you hesitate to enter. Who was the mother who first said to the needle, "Go ahead, yes"? Sailors were pierced to mark their first crossing of the equator, the invisible line designating the invisible. They tattooed crosses on the soles of their feet to protect them from the sharks that rose toward sinking ships. It would devastate us to see how young they were. Everything has already happened, at least an instant before we perceive it. The earth shakes so hard, church bells ring. There is a moment of dark between the flash and what follows. Emerging from a crowd in which I thought she had been lost, she appeared silently by my side. "How did you find me? How did you find me?" I kept asking, pointing to my chest. Why? To indicate me. This poem is called Through Line. Hitchcock made rope in continuous 10-minute takes because he was limited and thus freed by the amount of film he could fit in the camera. The film through which his genius was conducted, magnificent moments of ordinary life. The self must and loves to sustain the self and to abide the self between. A lone rock, immense in a grassy field, might have been a place where someone important sat down to rest. This ground was home to the giant, short-faced bear. The Great Lakes were ancient riverbeds that gave glaciers perfect pathways to the south. The place remains while time goes through it, and we are the thing it travels through. Arguably. In his travels, Marco Polo doesn't mention calligraphy or tea, chopsticks or the Great Wall. Historians disagree about whether he really reached China. We'll probably never know. Though he made it a place in the minds of many, which is its own kind of discovery. I once interviewed a Chinese poet who had been officially forgotten. He still sends me cards each year at Christmas. He served me tea, the soft pink undercolor of clouds. We lived in the same northeastern city, and he had no car, but I tasted the tea as elsewhere. Marco Polo believed the rhinoceri were unicorns, an understandable mistake, though he may well have been a liar as well as a thief. It was in prison that he persuaded a fellow inmate to write his adventures. To begin, he was no explorer. His adventures were the result of accident or fate. He had no use for discovery. He was a wanderer, a wayfarer, instead, out for himself. All in all, a pretty good example of what I'm talking about, at least in part. I'm going to read a couple of poems from On the Vanishing of Large Creatures. I'm going to read the title poem, On the Vanishing of Large Creatures. The Mayflower's passengers boarded without any inkling they would be revered. We imagined their journey with clean sails and blue sky, and the galley was probably filthy. Meriwether Lewis finally reached the Pacific after writing those dutiful descriptions of routes and rivers and new species, and just carved his name in a tree. Michelangelo, painting the Sistine Chapel, finished eventually and went home. But that fervor must be somewhere. As when the music finishes and floats off into the air, as when Stevens walked to work writing poems in his head, And when he got there, let the private part of his mind keep going. As when Van Gogh kept painting himself in the asylum because he was the only model he had. Oh, the spring river moves around the ice, and the flows chime out their ruin, taking with them the shape of the winter banks and the stones sloping down toward the bed. In bed, the body's glorious grasp of its anatomy will move off with its pleasure, and the shapes of the bones, the muscles, the tendons must all be relearned. No one remembers when it happened, but we were anchored to the earth in the time it took to draw water, hand over hand, up from the well. The stone wall stood unassisted all those years, and the oceans were once filled with giant creatures the fishermen stripped from the sea. I'm going to read one more from the book. It's called For Tracy Cernan. At night, in bed, when I am not asleep and listening, I hear my children down the hall, my son's soft snores. My daughter sucks her fingers as she shifts in sleep. Nothing must be done then. Nothing needs attending. The moon shines through the window. A kitchen light burns forgotten down the block, or is not forgotten, and someone is alone in the dark, and the rest of us will never know, as we know so little of the lives around us. Before us, in this very room, the heart broke reading the letter. The telephone rang and rang, then stopped. The last astronaut to walk on the moon left his daughter's initials in the dust, knowing they would remain there longer than he could imagine. I don't know who she is now, if she's ordinary, how she's changed. I'm going to read a poem called The End. It's not quite the end of my reading. I'm going to read 2 poems after that, but the poem is called The End. The End. In the hour before bedtime, my son and I walk to the park, put on skis, and glide into the dark. It is the first snow of the season, the week after Christmas, and distant colored lights are tacked to our neighbors' houses. The air is cold and carries the scent of someone's fire. We ski through the ring of trees that circles the space where horses raced 100 years ago. We surprise a woman out walking her dog one last time before bed. My son has outgrown the grand old school at the edge of the park. He never saw the ice rink the city made every winter until winter became too warm. To him, it's from a tale of an earlier time that isn't quite real because he is a child. And other people's childhoods are as easy to dismiss as the octave one leaps, singing somewhere over the rainbow because everyone knows how it goes. The earth makes ovals around the sun. The moon pulls waves from water. It's all just a story, even if it's true. When I was a girl here, the first snow fell before Thanksgiving. Backyard ice rinks stayed frozen until spring. When my son is a man, the weather will have warmed enough to make the world different. Someday, a mother might stand with her son beneath what passes for a winter night sky and point out a star with a planet where life glimmers through the blank bulk of space. The world would slip from us if we went such a distance. Black walnuts, striped party balloons, a dry lawn on a hot, ordinary day. And later, everything written inside us would be incrementally lost, like the language of Chaucer. I cannot translate what it means to be alive here better than my lungs hold the inner lives of trees. My son, faster than I, waits for me at the corner of the park beneath the streetlight. When I was a girl, I watched the winter cardinals hop from our low shrubs to forage on the earth. On frosty mornings, when they whistled, You could see the notes emerging. You could see the shapes of their song. Okay, a couple more. Last winter. Last night, another great snow, and now the neighbors, out before work, are managing the largesse, redesignating what is sidewalk, lawn, and street. The sky is white as paper. The snow glows with an inner blue. Upstairs, my daughter softly moves over the floor as she rises to wash her face and dress. At 12, she is apart from us, gathering her strength like a monarch fixed to milkweed. The wind outside keens, blows puffs of cloud, and when it stops, the air is exact, full of the same charged clarity that urges the soprano along her lengthened note, that sends the shark along the electrical path toward its prey. And I'm going to read one more poem called X. Röntgen photographed his wife's left hand in the first X-ray, her gracile finger bones, her wedding band. There was no word for such radiance, so he called it X. Thank you very much.